Good, good, good. Yeah, it's it's
Uh,
still early here, so yeah, been relatively slow so far.
mm. We'll just start the webinar now.
Okay.
All right. Anush, would you just walk us through your academic and professional journey and just introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I studied at JGU from 2012 to 2017. I did the BA LLB honors. So I was in the fourth batch of BA LLB honors. So back then we had under 1,000. I mean, I think close to 500 students when I started, and gradually now it is what it is. It was nice. I mean, JG was a great experience. Huge variety of modules, some excellent lecturers, which also pushed me towards competition somewhere around end of second year, because there was this internal moot court competition they had hosted. And I think Vikas Katuria, who used to work at Jindal back then, wrote the moot problem. So that was on competition law. So interested me, and then subsequently in fourth year, I done a module and some internship work on that, and so that's the area I was quite interested in. By the end of the third year, I think I decided or fourth year, I decided that I don't want to work in a law firm or in practice if I could help it. But I did enjoy studying the law, so academics was something that I sought to do. Which is why once I finished my time at Jindal, I'd applied for several masters, and I chose to go to the University of East Anglia in Norwich for their specialized LLM in competition law. There, I'd finished the LLM in competition law, and by the end of the third month in the LLM, usually you have to submit a PhD application if you want to pursue a PhD the year after that is. Otherwise, you have to wait a whole year. And I was quite keen to just continue studying, doing and do a PhD if I could. So around Jan time, I'd submitted a proposal, got accepted, got some funding, which takes a while usually. I can explain more about the process if you want me to later on. But in any case, around 2018, I started my PhD, and in summary, finished it about 2023 with the Viva and corrections and degree whatnot. So, and subsequently, or actually, no, in 2022 itself, I started working as a lecturer where I currently am at St. Mary's University in Twickenham. We're based in West London, and I've been working here for the last 3.5 years. Um, Now, in about a month or 2 months, I'll be moving to the University of Exeter to start a postdoc research fellow role. So I wanted to go into more specialized research into primarily, again, competition law research. And move away a bit from the teaching focus, which my university prioritizes a bit more teaching focus um, compared to many other research-based unis. So that's the current plan. And I think, yeah, in summary, that's basically been my journey. But I'm happy to explain different parts in more detail if you'd like me to. I can see that you're probably frozen, or I don't know if it's me. Oh, yeah, it's not me, it's you. I'll just wait for you to reconnect. Um, Yeah, I suppose since it's recording, I'll just continue talking. So my PhD was in competition law. It was mainly in EU competition law. Again, why EU competition law? It's somewhat the base for the rest of the world, including India. I did want to engage on Indian competition law as well. I started researching some cases from India, but at the same time, I thought it'd be good to set a strong base, which was also the recommendation of my supervisors, and therefore EU competition law, which I'd studied again in my master's, became the base. And my PhD was in digital markets, so EU competition law in digital markets, looking at the legislation that were coming up during that time, and 2018 to 2023 was a key time for digital markets. You had the reports come through the DMA, the Digital Markets Act, regulation of 2022 finally came into place. But during my PhD, they were discussing it, and there was a lot of deliberation, which allowed me to also write about it. So, give or take, that's basically what the PhD is about. And Rehat, you're back. So, basically, I thought I'll just keep talking since the recording was
Sorry
going on.
about that. I think there was some internet connection here, connection problem, of course. But yeah, please, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, so yeah, basically, I was just explaining about what I'd done in my PhD and the basic research journey of sorts. So yeah, I think in summary, I mean, again, from Jindal all the way till now, I've been focused on academia, but I'm happy to discuss any of the particular things in more detail, depending on whatever you suggest.
So, Anush, I just want to know what actually brought you into competition law. Actually, what motivated you to actually pursue this niche
Mm.
itself? So, was it some kind of policy, some kind of personal thing, or an academic, push that you had towards this particular law itself?
Yeah, so as I said, it was a few things. I enjoyed law, but I was never a big fan of hard law subjects. I mean, procedural stuff. I'm guessing a majority people don't get automatically interested in procedure, but in any case, I did really enjoy economics, even in school. So, competition law is that area that brings in different disciplines together, not just law, but there's a lot of economics involved. There's tiny bit of mathematics involved, which also I enjoy. And in some cases of competition law, also some political science in terms of monopoly power and the general idea behind what constitutes power, etc., and different power structures to a lesser extent. But economics plays a huge role in competition law. That's primarily why I was interested in competition law because I thought it's a nice segue to bring law and economics together. But also, as I said, in the end of the second year, I'd done an intra moot court competition at Jindal. So that was actually a great motivating factor for me because I realized that, okay, I really like this area of law, which makes you think a lot more rather than just pure case law analysis. Even the cases have a lot of economics involved in them, and that was the initial motivation. But apart from that, on pursuing it further, I'd done an internship at Lakshmi Kumaran and Sridharan, and around my fourth year time with the competition law team. It was about, I think, 2 months or 1.5 months. I worked on one of the landmark cases with them. It was Uber and Meru, or Ola and Meru, in 2017, 16, 17. And again, they allowed me to engage a lot on the case. I'd read the case and didn't actually contribute to it, obviously, because I was only an intern. But that was a great learning experience and made me think that, okay, I want to pursue this area further. That was the initial motivation, and it also helped in initially structuring my master's thesis and subsequently my PhD proposal. So that internship really helped because it brought into the question, what is this conception of dominance? Because that was the question in Meru and Ola. Also, because the idea was that Uber and Ola were not considered to be dominant players in the Indian market because they had a competitive constraint on each other, which is why firms like Meru and all could not bring in a positive claim of abusive dominance. So it was rejected based on the fact that they were not dominant. Otherwise, I mean, the practice itself was on something called predatory pricing, which is pricing below a certain measure of cost. The cost is usually average variable cost. And that question does not rise unless you prove first that a firm is in a dominant position. So the question arose, are we using the correct metrics of dominance? So, however, I didn't pursue that question in more thoroughly throughout my PhD, but it's actually a question that still surfaces at times in terms of whether we use the correct metrics for dominance in every jurisdiction, because the Indian system is more or less a complete copy paste of the EU system. So, yeah, even in terms of digital markets, there is a lot of copy pasting work. So there isn't something that is particular to the Indian context. And I suppose I could probably comment on that now because now I wrote a paper also on the Indian draft legislation, and I realized that, okay, there's quite a lot of similarity. So that does make one question into whether, let's say, Indian drafters, the people who work on the policy itself, whether we need to come up with something that's quite unique to India. And that's a question also I think some other people have raised recently. Some of my colleagues who work in competition law in India recently had seen a YouTube video by Ravina, who's now working in Shardul Amarchand, I think, or Cyril, I think Shardul. But yeah, she mentioned something on similar lines. But I can also see that India is becoming a pioneer in the field in different ways. There's recently there was a landmark decision where there was negotiations between the CCI and the firm, which can be something that there is other jurisdictions around the world can also look at. So yeah, having said that, some of these things interested me back then, but they still interest me now because again, it's a growing field, and that was the reason to get into competition law in the first place.
So even I have a research background, particularly international relations and peace and conflict studies. So as a researcher to another researcher, how do you think, and for young scholars also at the moment who want to go into law research, so how different is the UK research culture from the Indian research culture at the moment?
So I've never worked as a researcher in India, obviously, because I only did my undergrad, or at least, I mean, in my later years, that is. So, I mean, I did research things while I was doing my undergrad, but working primarily as a researcher, my experience has been exclusive to the UK, fortunately or unfortunately. So I don't have a comparative, a proper comparator there because I haven't actually researched in any other country. But at the same time, I think generally the research landscape in India, again, I think Jindal is one of the a few places in India that actually focuses on research. I would say rather, unfortunately, because I mean they're really good at it. They are the best at it by far, but I mean they're the only one at it. So again, I would say the general landscape in India isn't quite wide because again it's very practitioner focused. I mean again, I think in all my batch, I don't know if anyone else went into academia through and through because everyone was very practitioner focused, which is absolutely fine. But that's usually been the trend that people go very practitioner focused. I mean, I actually no, I do remember some people who have gone into academia, but um, 95%, 98% would tend to prefer actual industry, which is law practice, whether it's going to courts, whether it's working in a law firm. Again, I mean, there is obviously a financial reward to work in industry rather than in academia. So you need to really want to stay in academia for all the things that it does give you. So personally, apart from research, which I think I have liked and of late I'm really enjoying when it comes down to publishing. And I mean, I think it's quite a gratifying experience. I really love teaching. So teaching is something that I have enjoyed quite a lot. And luckily, I think the first time I ever taught was at Jindal to an LLB class in my fifth year with Mr. Faiz Tajuddin, who used to teach jurisprudence. So I'd done some TA work for him and had done a class on Thomas Hobbes, and that went quite well. So I think I always had this um, willingness to teach, and which is something that I've still enjoyed right now because in my current institution I do have a heavy teaching load, but it's quite nice end of the day when you are able to teach students something positive. And but it is a growing, I think, evolving, I think. Profession for me personally, because when I started lecturing, initially I was stressed about whether I'd cover all the content effectively, whether I know enough. But now I think it's about effectively making sure that the students are able to understand what you're saying. It's not about covering more; it's just about covering a small amount very effectively. So the I think the goals have changed slightly because I've realized that the student is perhaps as stressed at not being able to understand what you're saying as much as you'd be stressed that, oh, you don't know enough. And largely, in my experience, it has been that um, I think if the focus is more on engagement, I think your classes are more effective than sharing more information just to show that well, you know a lot as a teacher. So yeah, research and teaching, and generally the university experience, so has kept me, I think, in the university landscape for a while now. But yeah, so
Anush,
actually,
yeah,
you also
yeah.
asked a question on the UK research landscape. Here, it's quite thriving. It was very thriving when I started my PhD. There's a lot of funding. I'd got funding for my PhD, but the last 3 4 years, not so much. Funding has been drastically cut. If I were to do my PhD now, I'd be quite skeptical because let's say the amount of funding or number of the funding opportunities have been cut by at least half throughout the UK. In bigger institutions like Oxford, Cambridge, or UCL King's, where you have where they're not dependent on student numbers all the time, they're usually okay because they have a lot of funds to go to. But in most other universities, which are dependent on student numbers, which are dependent on other factors, they've had to cut down on funding opportunities for students, which is a shame for students and for the universities. But it is what it is. It's because international students have chosen other countries, but also different. The UK government policy hasn't done themselves any favors. So there are various factors, but of late the research landscape is getting limited just purely because of funding. Because I think, yeah, funding is something that is vital for people to actually actively engage in research. Otherwise, well, they're not gonna do it.
So Anush, for my next question, I would actually like to delve, combine both your, roles as a lecturer as well as a researcher. So while you were doing your PhD, the skills that you honed at that time, and you being a lecturer now, what those skills have added on to you being a good lecturer as well, and what all skills have you actually let go of or maybe evolved for your professional life itself?
Fair, yeah, that's a nice question. So I think the PhD was by far one of the most gratifying experiences in a way, but also one of the most, let's say, lonely and thought-provoking exercises that I've done in my life till then. But even now, actually, now I find I don't know if I should say this, but my job pretty easy compared to the PhD, because I think the PhD is a bit of a lonely experience where you're researching on one particular topic for a long time, and also it has to come together, at least in the UK, as 100,000 word document, and it all has to tie together. It just can't be okay different chapters, and it was hard for me, especially the first year. I think going from undergrad to masters to PhD directly. I mean, I was, I think, 24 when I started the PhD. So initially, I think I found the first year the hardest, just to get into that work ethic, just into getting into that mode of just self study. That'd be one meeting with your supervisor once a month, usually, at least in law PhDs. Sciences are slightly different, where you have more regular meetings based on weekly projects. But so yeah, that one meeting was great all the time, every month. But your progress is very self-dependent, and you are tracking your own progress along with your supervisors, but you're only answerable to yourself on a day-to-day basis. I found that actually quite hard to deal with, because again, I think having modules, having assessments and all, there's a particular structure, but PhD is this unique, let's say, job that you do your own agenda, you do your own goals, you have to do everything by yourself, which was the more stressful part rather than the actual reading, the actual writing. So after my first year, if I got a hang of the PhD, and I think I progressed much faster in my second and third year. Also, COVID helped a lot. So I think personally, I benefited from the first 6 months of COVID because there was nothing much to do. Things were closed around you. So For a PhD researcher like myself, was perfect because I thought, oh, okay, there's nothing to do, just sit and write. And I think the majority of my thesis I wrote in those in that 1 year, I think between second and third year, when not a lot was happening. So I had a lot of time to basically work on my thesis. So and subsequently got a good hang of okay what I'm writing about, and everything else fell in place. But yeah, I think so the question was on other skills that I learned, right? So I think on research skills, obviously I think that's a given. You have to engage on these research skills, otherwise you wouldn't pass the PhD. But again, just the ability to manage your own time. I realize that I'm not someone who wakes up in the morning, finishes by 4 or 5, and goes off to do other things. So which many people did. You wake up really early, start working, and then finish off. For me, it was slightly different. I used to start a bit later, but I also used to finish much later. Sometimes work in the night. So I think some of the undergrad mindset never went away. Off late, I mean, I think my structure has changed again because I mean, in universities, when you work, you have to teach in the mornings and all. But yeah, as a researcher doing a PhD, I think it's up to you when you decide to work. You could work early morning, you could work at 2 a.m. in the night, and do nothing in the morning. So it's totally up to you. And yeah, it's an interesting time. It's just about making sure that you get the work done in the end. So again, I think I like this idea that it was more output related. You get the work done. It doesn't actually matter when you work. So which is what I personally like compared to, let's say, working in a law firm or working in a 9 to 5 job. You go in, you go out. I don't think that is something that I'm particularly keen to do. That's why I think I'm going back to the postdoc route from a lecturer role currently as well. I think focus more on research, but now I think it's more output and goal related because the current project we're undertaking is again analyzing different digital market legislation, the EU, UK, Germany, and I'm also going to bring in some Indian perspectives and probably will write some reports and hopefully let's see what the future holds in terms of that project.
So, Anush, I think publishing is one thing that is really crucial to your, research academia in general.
Hmm.
So, how were the early stages of publishing for you as a researcher in the UK itself?
Sure. During my PhD, in the first few years, I didn't engage on much publishing just because I was writing and trying to learn a lot. So I would say I figured out publishing personally maybe a year or two late, too late for myself. Not too late, but a year or two later than what I would have wanted to. But I think I moved quite quickly once I figured it out. So I think I published a lot in a short time span just because I thought, okay, now let's just get all of it out. But initially, it's a bit daunting because you want to find journals, you want to see how you actually go about with the publication process. So at least for me, if I take an example of how published my first piece. Um, my first piece actually, funnily, was published with a couple of co-authors. It was one of their ideas. It was on an Indian legislation with a colleague of mine who studied with me, Mohit Yadav, good friend, and a person who currently teaches at Jindal, Gaurav Pathak. So it was on the maintenance of senior citizens. So it was an idea they'd come up with, and they asked me for input, and I provided some input, and uh, they were nice enough to include me also to write with them, and we'd come up with a nice article that got published around last year. But around the same time, I'd also started to send my works from my PhD. Break my chapters out, create them into articles, and then publish them in different journals. So the European Competition Journal, which is quite a big one for competition law, accepted a couple of my papers that I'd sent to them. So they got published last year as well. However, it is a bit of a hit and miss because before that, I'd sent some of my works to different journals, and you'd get rejections, and which is part of the publishing process. But one of the journals I know did take about 6 months to just send back a desk rejection, which was a bit annoying because I didn't rework that article for 6 months, so it's just sitting there, no comments, nothing, and then 6 months later, you just have to resend it somewhere else. So But then, luckily, I presented it at a conference and developed on it somewhat. But that kind of situation can happen when you submit somewhere, you don't get a response for a long time, and you don't know what to do, because once you submit to a particular journal, you don't have the opportunity to send it to another journal. If you do that, you'll be in trouble, because if the journals get to know, then you'll probably be embargoed by other journals. So you should never do that. If any researchers are listening, don't double send your journal articles to other journals just because you think, oh, you now sent it to a smaller journal than you, but you want to aim for a bigger one. As no, it doesn't work like that. Choose one. However, I think before all that, during my PhD, I'd published some of my works in working paper series. So different institutions have their own working paper series. This was on competition law, competition policy with the Center for Competition Policy at UEA. Like that, I mean, if you have a working paper series, it's a nice way for you to show your work to the rest of the world. It's still not considered a proper publication because a working paper series is reviewed by the editors and they put it on online. It still looks nice and fancy under the working paper, logo and all. But a publication is usually when it's peer reviewed, at least a good publication, or a blind peer reviewed, and at least if I were to share information on how someone should go about finding the journals that they would like to publish in, Scopus is a great place to look at different journals. Scopus are dot sources. So you just type Scopus sources on Google and you get into the Elsevier as a website. There you can type the name of the journal or look at different categories and find the journal that would suit you. One thing that you can also consider is the site score. The higher the site score, usually it's the harder it is to publish there. So in law, usually a site score of above one nowadays, I think, would push you to somewhere around what is considered the second quartile of journals. So anything above 50% is considered to be within the second quartile. Anything above 75% would be a percentile, would be considered to be within the first quartile, which is the top few journals within the field. I'm going to continue talking. I think it's quite important for you to see where you want to publish. If it's, let's say, a relatively low key publication, if it's a case note, if it's something that that you haven't worked extensively on, it's maybe a couple of months of work, but you want to get it out there. You probably want to look for a Q3 or a Q4 journal, something that's within the 0 to 25 percentile or 25 percentile to 50 percentile. Not to say they're bad journals. It's still indexed. It's still it's still good in quality. It's peer reviewed, but the site scores of journals change over a period of time. So anything above, let's say, 0.5 in law, it's probably worth considering. Between 0 and 0.5, still there are some journals that are developing, that are coming, that are establishing themselves. I think the Jindal journal is somewhere around 0.3, 0.4 currently. So it's an up and coming journal, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be above one and further on. But I think as far as Indian law is concerned, the best one right now is the Indian Law Review, which is close to one. So it's just about touching the second quartile, but I think it's a very good journal. I think it definitely has scope to grow and go close to site score of about two-ish. But yeah, I think that's just some piece of information on journals and site scores. But everything can be found on Scopus, and which is Elsevier's website. Um, but I think it is quite important to be measured, because if you have a certain piece of work and you send it to one of the top journals with a very high site score, it's likely it'll get rejected. So it's, I think, quite important for you to choose a journal smartly. And this is what I think I didn't do initially when the one that rejected me after 6 months. They had quite a high site score. I'm still keen to publish there, but I think my next piece that I'm working on currently, I'll send there, because I feel the previous piece that I had sent while I was working on my PhD chapters, which was a part of my PhD, I don't think, I mean, now looking at it, perhaps there was scope for it to improve, and maybe there was a fair reason for them to reject it. So yeah, if you're looking at a very high site score, a journal, look at exactly what they need. Look at the word count. Look at what the journal covers, the scope of the journal, and make sure that you meet the requirements quite precisely. Also, look at the past articles. If you're repeating ideas, journals are going to reject them usually, especially a high side score journal. So, if you're able to contribute something quite unique, then probably the journal will consider it. But then again, then it comes to academic integrity and things like how well you've researched, how well you've cited your paper and all that. So yeah, but it's a fun game once you start publishing, because once I got my first one last year. Now by around this time, I think I just recently got my ninth one accepted. So things have moved quite quickly in about 1 year. So I think once you start publishing, it becomes quite addictive, and I think on track to get, I think, four or five more by the end of the year. So hopefully, let's see. I mean, unless things don't work out how planning for them to work out, should touch about 14, 15.
Anush, in lines of my previous question only, so what is your take on AI then? So, like people using ChatGPT or other AI tools for their, publications, how do you think they should be integrated into, your publications itself, or will it be okay to do that if you want to
Yeah,
publish your
absolutely.
stuff?
I think to research, I don't think it's useful to write though. I don't think using the text, let's say that generative AI provides you, you should use to copy paste and then use that in your final text. I don't think that's ideal, because I think you want to come up with your own writing. If you want to learn from it, absolutely fine, because they're tools at the end of the day. So why should you avoid using them? It's like using Google search. It's like using Control F. It's basically new technology. You need to embed them. Now, many journals also have a policy. They say we are okay with you using Gen AI, but just disclose it. That's great. I mean, I think I've seen that with the European Competition Journal. I've seen that with some other good journals. They have a disclosure statement, and there's no repercussions on you. Because I think that's the way forward. Gen AI is something that you should use as much as possible, because I think if you don't, I hate to say it, but any job that you do, it'll become redundant in the future if you don't learn how to use new technology as well. If you move away, say, oh, it's bad, integrity and all these things. I mean, I think things need to evolve. I think our integrity policies also need to evolve accordingly. However, currently, I would say relying on researching using AI is fine if you know the topic well. For example, I would never use AI personally to research topics that I'm not well aware of. So, competition law is something that I probably would be very comfortable using AI with. Why? Because having done it actively, I've realized that sometimes it comes up with some fake stuff, and I am well equipped now to know, at least to an extent, within my area of, let's say, knowledge, Article 102 TFEU, abuse of dominance, or related areas, that some sources, some facts might be fabricated, hallucinated. So I think having that knowledge helps me to filter out what is okay, what is not okay. I think it's quite important to have that knowledge. If you do not have that knowledge and you start researching something, you take for granted whatever generative AI gives you. That is the problem, and that in those situations, I think it's avoidable to use Gen AI, because you might start believing whatever AI tells you, and you might have ended up probably accepting on face value whatever AI has provided you as the, let's say, result. So I would say that if you are somewhat knowledgeable about the area, using AI to find sources is fine, because it's basically a better version of Google search as far as I'm concerned. So you find those sources and go to those actual sources, and then you engage with them. Also, I think AI is a great tool to help, let's say, decode large documents. I think it helps filtering out, helps you reach precise paragraphs more easily in cases. Let's say you have a very long case, you put it in any Gen AI model that actually accepts, let's say, large documents. I, Most likely, you'll have to pay for some kind of Gen AI to be able to do this. Um, then it'll help you, and you say, can you please pinpoint to me paragraphs that discuss, let's say, something on constitutional rights, perhaps. And then it helps you pinpoint those paragraphs. It might be that other paragraphs are also relevant, but at least that's a good starting point. I would say if it helps in any kind of knowledge boosting and you getting comfortable with that document, I don't see any issue with it. However, again, I want to reiterate that relying on exactly what AI says, I think that's an issue. So that only happens mainly when you don't have knowledge of the actual area that you're using AI to research. If you have knowledge of an area, I think using AI is fabulous, and I think you'll only be able to improve on your previous work. And I would say currently, if you're writing papers without AI, I think, well, you're not giving yourself the best opportunity to, let's say, maybe write a completely foolproof paper or article. Having said that, I mean, I just want to clarify that when I did my PhD, I didn't have AI, so I did finish the PhD without any Gen AI. But in hindsight, if I had Gen AI, I think things would have been so much easier. But I guess I'm also speaking from this position where I think I had to struggle, to be honest. I mean, there was a bit of a struggle, especially towards the end, putting the PhD together, did my citations manually and everything. So, but having done that, I feel okay, I'm equipped to do that. But now using AI seems like a no brainer for me because I don't think it will get the better of me, at least in within the areas that I'm seeking to use it for. If I was probably researching human rights or something, probably I'll have been wrong to use AI. I'd probably be better off reading a textbook, equipping myself with the basic knowledge before I use AI. So that would be the suggestion. Equip yourself with the basic knowledge and then use AI so that you don't make the flaw of accepting whatever AI says on face value.
Anush, just for like this webinar is actually for the students that actually, see and, want to take you as their mentor, people who are interested in competition law. So people might be interested in watching this webinar. So for them itself, people who are, students who are pursuing their LLB or LLM,
Mm.
what and are interested in academic research in law itself. So what kind of practical steps can they take to begin their academic journey in this niche itself?
In competition law or in law generally?
In your in general or in competition law in specifics if you want to go.
Sure. I think firstly, obviously, it's subject specific knowledge. I think any area, competition or any other area, I think it's equipping yourself with all the knowledge that you can, just to understand whether you actually enjoy it. Because I think reading textbooks and all might sound like a mundane thing to do, but I myself do it very often now. Whenever I tend to forget something, yeah, I mean, especially if I'm teaching something, I just reread the textbook and the knowledge comes back. So I think the first thing is to make sure that you get the fundamentals right. Make sure that every single aspect of a particular area that you want to research, let's say if it's competition law, you want to make sure you understand the facets of competition law, the main pillars, abusive dominance, anti-competitive agreements, mergers, what they entail. Look at a particular jurisdiction. If you start with the Indian jurisdiction, absolutely fine. I think in general you have some very good teachers of competition law. I'm sure that there would be some new ones as well, and that'd be really good because again, general values, good quality teaching. So I think the classroom is the first place to start your engagement on competition law. But apart from that, then I think it's also looking at current news, looking at cases, things that interest you. That will then help you develop an idea on, okay, is this right? Is this wrong? Because that's the idea behind law study generally. Because you question, okay, has the court got this right? Has is the legislation effective? The basic question that you ask for any other area, it could be constitutional law, it could be competition law, it could be human rights. But the question is always, okay, is this right? Is this wrong? Simple thing. Same in competition law, but now you also consider economic factors. In competition law, though, I think if you are able to equip yourself with the understanding of economics in a more detailed manner, that would be great. I think if there are any modules on approaches to law and economics, which I did have, with Ashish Bhardwaj, who I think is now moved away from Jindal. Uh, uh, Modules like those were really helpful in bringing together law and economics, and say just understanding different economic concepts and how they play a role in the law. Now, why I also say that is majority lawyers aren't well equipped with the study of other fields like economics, and it'll give you a boost over most other people, because if you have a pure law study, I think an area like competition law you'd probably struggle with, because it is understanding conceptually whether, let's say, something is efficient, what this idea of efficiency is. And so there is this huge mingling effect between law and economics. And people who understand law and economics are by far the best scholars in the field currently. Having said that, I mean, I think I have a basic understanding of economics, but I wouldn't be able to understand the equations or econometrics just because I was never taught it. I only did law. So if you are able to, I think, especially when you're young, if you're able to understand econometrics, and if you're able to understand industrial policy early on, you're going to be really good in the field. I think, in hindsight, if I was able to probably consider those kinds of options, I might be quite, I think, even better off, because I'll be able to read hard economics papers and competition economics papers, which I think is a struggle for most lawyers as well as me. However, most economists would be able to read competition law papers. So I think economists are slightly more equipped in terms of understanding the whole field better. So that's why I think it's quite useful to understand this other field well enough, and then you come back to the law, because I think as lawyers, by the end of it, you'd find the study of case laws much more easier. There are some good books. There's a book called, I think it's just called Law and Economics, by Gunnar Niels and a couple of other authors. So there are these nice textbooks that give you, or no, I think it's Economics for Lawyers or something, something on those lines. But I think those would be the small steps that you could take to equip yourself with the best sort of knowledge. Because again, when you want to develop a clear idea, sometimes, let's say if you want to create a proposal for a thesis, you might have, let's say, a rudimentary idea of, oh, okay, abuse of dominance, has some issues. How do you deal with this in India? Okay, fine, that's a general question. Okay, this case doesn't seem like a good case. I want to redefine the metrics of dominance. Okay, fine. But then I think it's about going into more detail about, okay, what exactly about dominance is problematic? Is it market shares? Okay, market shares. Why is it problematic? Based on what example? Okay, one example. What happened in that particular case? But that one small aspect within one case needs to be a broader topic. So it's trying to, let's say, minimize your focus to the most minute detail, and then trying to broaden it again, and which is very hard skill in research, but again, it's something that most researchers have to engage with. For younger people, I would say, if you are interested in competition law, especially, I would only want to comment on competition law, but also I think it is something that you could consider for other areas as well. um, Limit your focus as much as possible. If it's to a case, if it's to one small part of a case, the more narrow your focus is, the better, because that you're able to contribute something to that narrow field or narrow aspect. If your questions are more broad, okay, we need to redefine economic policy. Fine, okay, you'll probably write something really nice, but it's going to be very broad, and 20,000 other people have written on this, and some of them, they've been working on this field for 40 years. What's your contribution? Probably not much. However, if you're looking at something very unique, let's say the CCI settlement decision that came out, and you're discussing the settlement decision and comparing it to, let's say, EU settlement decisions, very unique paper, very nice paper. And for me, if I were to judge some papers, let's say for applications that I get, I'd probably think, oh, this person's actually done their background research quite well. They've looked at one case, but now they've not only looked at that case, but they've compared it to some other jurisdictions. Fine, that comparative is again something that's generally done in most fields, and I think comparatives are relatively straightforward. But then again, there is some precise comparisons. However, if someone is just redefining the whole theory on anti-competitive agreements in India compared to the EU, without a lot of precision, that doesn't sound as interesting to me, even though on the face of it, that's supposed to sound as the more interesting topic for let's say a general audience, because it's redefining a whole concept. Well, I should probably read it, but I think it does come to end of the day, it does come to, have you earned the right to write on something general? And that's what it comes down to. So you need to establish yourself in narrow fields slowly, and then you start looking at broader fields, and which is something I think believe in, because most of my papers have been in narrow aspects of abusive dominance in digital markets, and I don't think I'll write something broad, at least for at least a few years, because I think I need to earn my right to do that. So I want to make sure I publish well enough within my narrow field, and then probably think about let's say broader area of research, and probably a book and whatnot. So again, that's my approach to how I would consider research, and would be my suggestion as well. I can see that Rohit is frozen again, so I'll continue speaking on research. So I think the first step to any research is thinking about a nice question. So think about what interests you. So the question Rohit asked me about, oh, what interested you, I think that's the question that always comes back to you, whether you're an initial researcher or a later one, or end of your career. What actually made you think about this topic? If you're writing something, something must have interested you, and that then you need to think about that topic and maybe clarify it to yourself and also to the reader well enough. So yeah, right, back to you.
Anush, thank you so much for taking this in a stride because my internet connection is not good. So,
No, that's absolutely
however,
fine.
however, just to wrap up the whole, webinar itself, is there anything else that you would like to add on?
You got cut again, so I couldn't hear anything. Now you're
Um,
back. Can you repeat that, Rohit? I couldn't hear anything you said.
I'm so sorry. My apologies for this. I just wanted to conclude the webinar. Any final thoughts that you have? Any final suggestions? Any final thoughts or any advice to the students that are actually watching this?
Yeah, try to see which field interests you, because you don't have to do a field just because you think it's something, let's say, everyone else is doing, or maybe try to find a niche for yourself. I think I try to find this niche in competition law also in a way, because I thought it's quite unique and it wasn't as talked about back in 2017, 18. I mean, it was still up and coming. I think it's still up and coming, but now slightly becoming a bit more dense, because I mean, again, it's quite a relevant field. There's a lot happening within the field, but like that, I think there might be other areas that are up and coming: AI, digital markets. Try to find your niche, even within the area that you pick. You can always find a niche within a niche within a niche. So it's all about finding that small area of interest for yourself. And I'm happy to say that I'm still interested in abusive dominance and predatory pricing and things that interested me about 8 years back. And that's why I'm still writing about them. And I'm happy to continue researching on these very particular aspects. Most other people aren't going to be interested in it, but I think, that's the job of a researcher, to be able to contribute to this niche field in a very, let's say, discursive manner, in a detailed manner. And it's, I think, also you need to dare to be boring to others in a way, not to yourself, but because you're really interested in something and you do come up with some, let's say, excellent piece of research. 99% of the population won't read it, but the experts who will read it, they'll think, "Ah, okay, this is a good piece of work, and it'll stand the test of time." 50 years later, probably the theory you came up with in that particular small area will still be relevant, because some of the papers I read on competition law are from the 60s, 70s, 80s. Back then, the pioneer scholars, the Hovenkamps, the Robert Burks and Williamson, and all these different Ordover and Willig, all these different scholars who'd written on these areas. Probably back then they didn't think that their papers would become as famous as they are now, but they still stand the test of time. So yeah, have faith that, I mean, they will be read in the future, even if it's not read immediately. But at the same time, even if it's not read, it's still this significant piece of contribution you're bringing to the literature. And I think it's just about enjoying it by the end of it. So start narrowly, but then broaden out when you think you're confident. That's all.
Krish, thank you so much for
Thank you, Rahat. I think you're getting cut again, but I'm assuming you said thank you, and yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to come here and talk as well. So
all right, thank you so much. Hopefully we
you're still getting quite cut,
will
but I heard thank you, so I'm gonna leave because I can't hear you anymore. Oh yeah, now I can see you again. Okay.
yeah, the only thing I wanted to say is thank you and for your time. Thank you for doing this, and hopefully we'll do this again. So yeah, we can drop off the call now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, bye.